환영해주세요.
안녕하세요. 저는 마이크로소프트 안에 케이블 경험팀에서 Windows Subsystem for Linux Product Manager를 맡고 있는 Loewen입니다. 네, 오늘 우리는 윈도우에서 흔히 주는 리눅스 환경을 만드는 방법에 대해 이야기해 볼게요. 그런데 이 말이 어쩌면 무슨 좋게 들릴 수도 있을 것 같아요. 윈도우와 리눅스는 둘 다 OS인데 왜 두 개를 동시에 써야 할까요? 사실 마이크로소프트는 리눅스를 엄청히 좋아하기 때문에요. 저희의 가장 큰 목표 중 하나는 여러분이 가장 좋아하는 리눅스 워크플로우를 윈도우에서 직접 사용할 수 있는 환경을 제공하는 것이고, 이것이 Windows Subsystem for Linux를 출시하게 된 이유입니다. Windows Subsystem for Linux 아니면 WSL 사용하면서 통합이 많아요. GPU 연동, Linux GUI 애플리케이션 사용, 자동 파일 공유 등 여러 가지 있습니다. 그래서 한마디로 윈도우스와 리눅스는 두 마리 토끼를 다 잡을 수 있다는 거죠. 제가 보여드릴 것은 윈도우 안에서 리눅스 워크플로우만을 사용하면서 오픈소스 프로젝트에 라이브 코드 체인지를 하는 과정과 그 안에서 윈도우와 GitHub에 새로 지원하는 AI 기능들을 통해서 더 쉽고 더 빠르다는 것이 있습니다. 제 한국어가 부족하기 때문에 지금부터 저는 영어로 설명할 거지만 궁금한 거나 질문 있으시면 나중에 저한테 직접 연락해 주세요. Okay, so the rest of the slides are all demos. So that's it for slide content. Everything else we're going to be doing live. So I'm going to hop out. And this is my desktop on Windows for my travel computer. But we're going to be doing development, and I want to use a beefy machine. And so I'm going to be using a cloud dev machine up in the cloud. And so this is my dev box, and it runs entirely in Azure. So it all runs here. And so I can use a powerful machine no matter where I am. And it's the same machine even if I'm traveling. And so I'm actually on my real desktop now, on my development desktop. And all I have to do is open up Windows Terminal, and I get access to PowerShell, just like you would on any Windows machine. But what's cool is I can drop down here, and then I have access to Ubuntu and multiple versions of that. So I can install different Linux distros. And all I have to do is click it, and I get access to a shell. So now I'm ready to start developing, start doing my code change. And I want to introduce the project that we're going to work on today. This is a personal project of mine. It's actually how I track my daily tasks. It's just called Auto Task Calendar. It's very ugly, so please don't judge because I'm not a designer. But it looks like this, and this is actually how I track my day-to-day tasks. And so I've made a test account that just shows a calendar, and it has tasks in here. Why I like using it is because a lot of times people will ask me, do this thing. And I will have to schedule that. And so I schedule it. And let's say it will take 120 minutes to do that. And then this tool, when I schedule it, will tell me, hey, that thing that person asked isn't possible to fit into your calendar. And so if I go, let's say, complete some tasks, then I can fit that inside of the calendar once everything gets moved around. So that's why I use this. What we're going to be doing today is making a code change to it, since this is an open source project that anyone can go use or contribute to. And we're going to be doing that all with Linux workflows. So to get started, it's literally as easy as just going to my dev folder, if I can spell it correctly. And we're going to run code insiders dot, because I am using everything on the latest today. And so we're going to open up VS Code here. And so it's actually downloading a server. The server is going to be running inside of Linux, but all of the GUI is running on Windows. And how you can tell is because in the bottom left, we have this cool WSL Ubuntu text here. So when I'm actually running this, it's in my Ubuntu distro. Even cooler than this, we can reopen this in a Linux container. So what's happening now is we are building this project. We're building the container responsible for hosting my website, and we're opening up VS Code inside of that container. Why I do this is because that container is what's running in the cloud. I'm now running the exact same production environment that I'm running locally. And it's running in Mongo database locally, so I can go ahead and play around with this as much as I want without affecting production. And so you can see that that little icon on the bottom left has updated, sorry widgets, get out of the way, has updated to dev container. So we're actually running inside of the container. And now, just to get started, all I have to do is run my start command, and we are off to the races. So it's going to start building my app, and I can go ahead and open it once it's done building directly with localhost. So it says localhost 8080. It's all forwarded over correctly. And so even though I'm running a Linux container, even though I'm running in Linux, I'm able to access it using Microsoft Edge with localhost. And that's the goal of the Windows Subsystem for Linux. Everything should just feel like the same machine. And so you can see if I go, I should have named the accounts different things, but if I go ahead and sign into the account, I have my calendar with all of those fictitious tasks, and then this is different from, you can see that they're different ones from the actual production. So this is just running locally on my machine. I put in some good stuff like eat, Sam, go, sell, etc. And really to show the level of integration, that's just getting set up with my project. But I can do other things. A lot of the time, you are not just in VS Code. And so sometimes you need a file explorer. Sometimes you prefer to use a Linux file explorer like Nautilus. I can go ahead and run that, and it all works. And I can even go ahead and open these windows, and you will notice that it has Windows-based shading right here in the corner. So it all behaves exactly like a Windows window, despite this being Linux GUI apps. And I've even set a symlink to my downloads folder on Windows. So I can go ahead and double click this, and you can see the background that I've chosen today. I can open this up in Eye of Gnome. And it all works exactly like it would on a Linux machine, even down to the applications icons down here in the taskbar. You can see that they're the Linux applications. When we donate, we explain that it's Linux by putting Tux, the friendly penguin, in the corner of each of the icons. So you're able to use any Linux application that you'd want for your development environment, for your development workflows. This also works in other interesting ways, where perhaps you prefer using Windows tools. But I am in the Linux file system. If I do pwd, I'm in a Linux file system. I can actually still access these same files from Windows. So I'm going to go ahead and run PowerShell.exe from within Ubuntu, which is a strange thing to do. And I'm going to run start. From there, we're going to open up Windows File Explorer to our Ubuntu file instance. So here we have this project, which is in Linux. If I can go look here, you can see that the address here is actually inside Ubuntu. And I'm able to access that with File Explorer. I can go ahead and open up all these files with Notepad or VS Code, just like I would with any other project. And so the reason of why I'm showing these features is we really want to make it as easy as possible. If you're using a Windows machine, you don't have to be afraid of losing access to your Linux workflows. And if you're curious about Windows features and you normally use Linux, you can try it out and try out some of the new things that we've been making to help developers. So let's jump back to my workflow and we'll make a change. So let's try and do something simple. I have an about page on this website, which is pretty useless. It just has a picture. So let's add a change here. All we need to do is navigate to that page, about, and then from here, I want to use an AI feature to actually make this change. And so I have, because I'm using VS Code Insiders, I'm using GitHub Copilot Insiders, and we have a new chat functionality here. So I can select my HTML code, and you can see where I was testing it before. But I can go clear it, and I can say, talk to Copilot and explain what I would like to do. So in this case, I'm going to ask it, hey, we had 2 columns of text and an image. Let's change that to 3 columns, and let's change the image and put some content in there. So I'll write that up very quickly. So can you make 3 columns with the center being the Ubuntu PNG image and the right saying hello in Korean? So I'll write that. And then from here, it'll actually write that code for me. And all I need to do is just press enter into it. And so it's gone ahead and modified my code. And I can save this. And now when I go back to my website, it's updated it. So I've done that just entirely through description, which is really cool. And so this way we want to make coding a lot faster. We want to make it a lot more, we want to make you less dependent on going to Stack Overflow and copying, necessarily code and seeing if it works. We want you to be able to have, a conversation of, hey, this didn't work the way that I wanted it. Perhaps we could ask it to change things, etc. So you're able to go in and make a lot of changes very quickly. But there's also other ways we can use Copilot. And so let's say I go to one of my JavaScript functions here. I'm just going to choose one at random. And let's pretend that I don't have comments for it, which I don't. And if I type in anything, Copilot will actually start recommending suggestions for me while I'm typing. And so it will be able to take like sections of my code, and while I'm typing inside of it, it will comment it automatically for me if I like. So it will explain, hey, this piece of my code is checking if the user is logged in. And then other places, like I could take this function and it could say get user info. And so this way you can even do things like, let's say we added, add new user function. If I write that comment, and then I go to a new line, it will start writing that code for me. And so you can basically have your choice of running your AI tools as a chat, and maybe you have questions, or directly inside of your actual workflow. And again, all running on Linux, all running with GitHub as well. And so once that's saved, let's actually go ahead and push this to production. That's actually really easy. We can do it from the integrated terminal. I prefer using Git in the CLI myself. And so we'll just do git add dot, and we'll do a git commit m, and I'll just call up Ubuntu for the sake of time. And then from here, some of you might be going, okay, you're in a container in Linux. How are you going to get permissions to Git? There's no way that Git works. The cool part is that it actually does work because we basically made a lot of the wiring possible, where we can use your Git credentials from your Windows Git credentials all the way up into this container. And so if I even go back to my terminal, I can do something like cat and then my git config, and you can see that it's actually using the helper, the git credential helper, is actually the windows.exe for that. And so the Linux binary, when it's saying give me access to git credentials to authenticate, it's actually calling into the windows.exe to do all the authentication for that. So this is our goal, really, to try and blur the lines as much as we can. And so now that that has gone and pushed to main, the last thing I want to show is this actually running. I have this set up with GitHub Actions. to automatically push to production. So I don't have any tests, so there's no CI, but there is CD because there is continuous deployment. And so this actual change that I've just made now is building up in the cloud, and it is going to automatically push to the website. And so come about 30 minutes from now, this change will be live, and I won't have to do anything else. And so really that's the goal of the demo today, just to summarize, is very quickly we were able to get access to a Linux workflow. We're able to exactly replicate what we had in production onto my machine for development purposes. And we're able to run all that in Linux and make a code change with AI and send it up to the cloud. And that's it. That's all that's required to get changes to my actual customers, which is very powerful. And so the last thing that I want to show is we have some other features coming to help improve this as well. AI is still something that's new and changing faster than any of us can keep up with. And so we at Windows, at the Windows org, are also making changes to it too. And so you've seen it in your code workflows. We're also bringing it to your Windows operating system as well. So I am on a very early version of Windows that is here. So this is pre-release. It's you can get access to it by joining Windows Insiders. And if you go to this version of Windows, you can get access to GitHub Copilot, or Windows Copilot inside of Windows. And you can ask it questions now, like it works similar to how Bing Chat would work, or ChatGPT. But what's cool is you can also ask it things about the Windows operating system, and we plan to keep expanding this in the future. So for example, I can ask it to currently change my settings to light mode. And then now that I've asked it this, it uses plugins, AI plugins with Windows. Okay, I'll start over. It's insider stuff, so there's not a chance that it always works. But it uses plugins inside of Windows to actually go ahead and make some of the changes that you would ask for. So change to light mode instead of dark mode. And we'll see if it works. So demo didn't work. It's preview. I urge you to try it for yourself. I'll try it one more time with a regular question, and we'll see. Change settings on your PC. Last time. Things don't always work. That's okay. It's new. And the goal is to keep expanding that. The one that I showed today is super simple. This is early stuff. That's not even released yet, right? That's why it's simple and just being worked on. We want to keep expanding that. And so the things that we want to see down the line are, get my PC ready for development. Wouldn't it be cool to pull up all the windows to set it up like you set it up before? Or to ask things like, what was I doing yesterday? What was the bug that I was working on? And it could remember, well, you were working on this bug at this location in the code. Here's a title for what the bug is that you could put in. That's the goal of what we'd like to do. And so those are the things that we want to keep bringing towards the Windows operating system. And really my goal today is, this is an open source software canonical conference. These features are currently, Windows-specific OS features. I urge you to try them out and try the Windows Subsystem for Linux with them, because our goal is to make them work with Linux workflows as well. So the workflows that I showed today for all of your Linux projects should just work with these two. And the last one is one that I can talk about. We don't have a demo for it yet. We're also working on adding AI into the Windows terminal itself. So how many times have you had it where, I want to view the top 5 processes by CPU usage right now in terminal. I don't know how to write that in Bash. I don't know how to write that in PowerShell, but I could very quickly, Google or Bing that and see the results and then paste that in. Wouldn't it be cool if AI would be able to help you? And that's what we're working on adding. Basically a shortcut that you would be able to press inside of terminal and just write in native language of I would like to do this, and then it pushes in the command for you. So those are the features we're working on. We have some time left, and so I'd like to just give a better insight into kind of what just happened and how it all works behind the scenes. And so we're all technical folks, and this is my favorite time to explain the architecture of what's happening. And so what we're actually doing in this case to power the Windows Subsystem for Linux is we are running a lightweight utility VM in the background. So this is actually technology that was first developed with Azure, because Azure needs to make lots of VMs start up very quickly and shut them down quickly. We brought that to use with the Windows Subsystem for Linux. That's how I was able to start up that virtual machine in just a few seconds. And when you're done using it, when I close all those windows, we shut it down for you to conserve resources in your computer. And so the little arrow there between Windows land and Linux land is the really important part. That allows us to do things like PowerShell.exe inside of Bash, or GUI apps, etc. We've added so many pieces of integration so that you don't have to worry about like a dual boot scenario where are my files in Linux or are my files in Windows? We want it to make it as comfortable as possible. And what are we working on next? What is next in store for this area? The first is we want to work on performance improvements for networking. So the session before us definitely ran into some of the issues that we hear about today. We want to improve those. We want to improve memory and disk usage inside of WSL. We also want to improve enterprise support. I'm sure you saw the session before about it's painful sometimes to set up WSL in an enterprise. We want to make that a lot easier. And then lastly, we want to improve tools for managing your WSL distributions. And so as a last slide before we go to questions, if you want to learn more, you can find me on Twitter or on LinkedIn under Craig A. Loewen. You can check out our docs at WSL Docs, install WSL. The best way actually to get started, I'll show you right now. Just go to any Windows PC and run WSL --install. And that's it. And then that should install you on any machine. So if you want to get started today, just run that. And that is it for the content that I had today. So I'll open the floor to questions. Thank you very much.
크레이그 로잉께 다시 한번 감사의 말씀드립니다. 질문 있으신 분들 지금 질문해 주시기 바랍니다.
You mentioned that it's a insider's kind of program.
Like.
Would it be also if it gets generally available? Will it be also publicly available on Windows 10, or will it be specific for Windows 11?
Right. So the Windows Subsystem for Linux in general is available on Windows 10 and 11 today. So you feel free to go use it basically on any supported machine. You'll have access to that. Right now, the Copilot features that I showed you span kind of a lot of different versions because it's so new. So the Windows Copilot feature that I showed, which was the sidebar, let me pull it up and I'll show you exactly what I mean. This feature, this is available right now on the latest Windows Insiders. It's right now just for Windows 11 up essentially of Insider builds. I wouldn't be able to tell whether that would go back to Windows 10 or anything like that. And then the other feature that I showed, which was this Copilot chat, this is based inside of VS Code, and so works on both Windows 10 and 11. Thank you for a good question.
So, firstly, I want to mention that, in my opinion, the Microsoft Copilot didn't work because, well, I mean, what kind of psychopaths users light mode for development? I think Copilot did that too.
Exactly. It tried to stop me.
And I want to ask you one thing. All the features you showed here are based on the WSL 2, right? I'm using WSL 1 because my Windows 10 is like stick to the old version. Will all the features you have presented here will be available on WSL1?
Yeah, great question. So there's actually two types of WSL distributions. Let me show you what I mean by that. I can go from PowerShell and run WSL-L-V. This just stands for dash list, dash verbose. And I can see that I have some different distros installed, version 2. There's also version 1 distros. Version 2 is the default right now, but if you're on older Windows versions, you might encounter version 1. The difference is, version 1, we had a translation layer, and so all of the kernel system calls were translated to Windows calls. So there was no virtualization present. In WSL 2, we have virtualization, and we use a real Linux kernel, and that allows us to do things like Docker, GUI apps, and more advanced features. So the answer to your question of would I see some of these feature improvements in WSL 1? Not necessarily. I would recommend moving to WSL 2 when you are able to upgrade your Windows version, and then you'd be able to get the latest features and improvements.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, just a quick question. I really wanted to ask because as a DevOps kind of guy, I just really have to care about the resources, about which processes use how much memory and CPU. And if we're going to use cgroups on Linux, and can it actually control processes on Windows? And since we're calling them straight away inside the command line, and is that actually available to actually manage processes of actually bare bone Windows in Linux?
Yes, kind of. And so let me show you what I mean by that. We can do a quick demo. So inside of WSL, I can look at all my processes with PS, AUX, will show everything. And if I go to my task manager, we can see that there is one process that is responsible for running WSL. It's the VMM WSL process, which I've lost. There we go. Virtual machine worker process. Here it is. And so this process is responsible for running WSL. So right now, you can see that the whole WSL virtual machine is taking up 3.5 gigs on my machine. And if I wanted to go manage this from within Linux, the way that I could do that is through PowerShell. And so, the answer of why it is a yes and a kind of is I can do PowerShell.exe, and I can get access to PowerShell right away, and I can use PowerShell commands to manage my Windows processes. And then if you want to manage the machine overall, what I would recommend is managing this as a process itself. And so our goal is that this will grow and shrink in memory usage as you use it, and CPU usage, obviously, as you use it. And actually, I can show an unreleased feature of WSL that we haven't talked about yet. What we are working on is improving the way that memory is behaving inside of WSL. Right now, when you access files, Linux caches all of that. We are adding an ability with a new Linux kernel version where we will basically intelligently get rid of the cache for you over time. And so even if you go build a bunch of Docker containers, that memory usage of VMM WSL will grow maybe to 10 gigabytes. Over time, it will then shrink back down, and it'll go about as low as 500 megabytes. And so we hope that you don't have to manually go configure everything.
Thank you for answering.
Thank you.
네, 시간이 다 돼서 세션은 이것으로 마치도록 하겠습니다. 그리고 오웬님께 큰 박수 한번 부탁드립니다.